Welcome to the Mold Matters Podcast. Whether you are looking for help recovering from mold illness or just want to learn more about creating a safe environment for your family, this podcast is the place for you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Mold Matters Podcast. This is episode 2. This is a podcast where Mike and I talk about all things mold. How it lives and travels throughout our homes, through our living spaces. We talk a lot about the health impact of mold. Mold is becoming an ever-increasing issue in the health world. And basically, we're combining our years of experience to share with anyone who cares to listen, which you pointed out last time. People are clamoring to find out about mold.
I'd love to know about mold.
It's a very hot topic. And so we're going to just share from our experiences and our expertise and from our research. And some of the most pertinent and interesting things is what we'd like to share on this podcast. So, episode 2, here we go. Before we jump into the topic, I'd like to recap what we talked about last time, because what we're talking about today dovetails right into what we're going to talk about today, which is testing for mold. So last week, Mike, you introduced a concept which I'm going to give you the credit because I think you're the one that coined this phrase, mold load.
Yes.
Load.
Yes.
You have to pause between the two words, else
because it's a tongue twister.
It'll twist your tongue.
So if you pretend like you're thinking it through mold load, then it works.
Yeah, you just have to pretend like you're thinking.
Yeah.
I think you're the one that really coined that phrase and really came to understand what that is. Would you introduce that concept real quick?
Yeah, so what we found over the years is that a home just naturally increases its mold load. We're talking mold growing in different areas of the home, sporing, your spore count climbing, and your mold growth climbing. And it goes through cycles. And the bottom line is that over years and years and years, your mold load increases. And then you throw in a couple of, disasters like a water softener breaking or a hot water heater breaking or some leaks or whatever, floods or whatever. That kind of makes the whole problem, it turns it into almost an exponential problem. And your mold load really climbs up from that. And we'll touch on this on another episode, but the inherent flaws of traditional mold remediation, going in and just taking care of that one area, is kind of a problem. They're not addressing the mold load, if you will, on the entire home. So anyway, that's what we talked about. We did mention that everybody knows what we're talking about when we say that smells like a grandma and grandpa house. Well, that's 40, 50 years of mold levels climbing in your home.
Didn't you say the actual visible mold that you get from a leak or from whatever water damage is possibly only 10% of the whole mold load?
Or less even, yeah. I mean, that's just in general.
Yeah.
But the cumulative effect of all these different pockets of mold growth that you have in a home, including, your windowsills, your bathrooms in general, your caulking around your showers and tubs, the first few inches of every drain, front-loading washing machines, I mentioned windowsills. Anyway, all of these little pockets of mold, they spore out, and then they increase in growth, and then they spore out more, and then those spores go out and find other places to grow. So when you have a flood, everybody thinks, well, my mold is just right there. Well, no, your mold is there. It's manifesting itself there because that's where the moisture was. But your entire home, the mold spore level is elevated, and the entire home needs to be addressed as opposed to just taking that one room apart and rebuilding it.
And can I give a case in point that's really applicable, and it actually just happened yesterday? A lady here locally has been calling me for months, and she had some mold, a leak under her cabinet or under her sink, and it got into some of the cabinets, behind some of the cabinets. And the maintenance, it was an apartment, so they had a maintenance crew come in, with some sprays, and I think they cut out even some portions as well. Sprayed, cut out some things. Actually, let me rewind. We took an air test before that.
Okay.
And it was showing really high counts of Stachybotrys, which is known, black mold spores essentially. The maintenance crew came in, did some spraying and some cutting out. 3 weeks later, she called us back. She's like, I'm still not feeling right. We took another air test. The counts actually didn't change at all.
Yeah.
It was almost identical.
Right.
And so case in point where they took care of the visible mold, but they really didn't address the air quality and the rest of the home.
Right, and that's one of the things we mentioned in the last podcast was the things we've done over the last 40, 50 years in this country to change the way we build homes. We wrap them tight since the 70s and the energy crisis. We wrap homes way too tight, they can't breathe. Even the way we frame homes now is more conducive to mold growth.
Mm-hmm.
And, we changed from plaster to sheetrock and just a whole list of things we've changed over the last 40, 50 years that made this a real issue.
Mm-hmm. We'd like to dedicate a full podcast to some of the things that we do in our building that makes mold a nightmare, really. So great. This is a great backdrop. So I think the natural question that I'm asking myself, and I imagine some of our listeners are, okay, I don't have any visible mold, or I did, and I got it taken care of. How do I really ascertain what the mold load is on my house? Was that a good pause?
Yeah, that was a great pause. Yeah.
It helped.
I maybe suggest it's a little longer.
A little longer.
But it's good. It's a good start.
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people when I'm doing my mold inspections, people want to know, how do I really tell what the mold environment is like in my house? What kind of testing options do I have? What tools are out there to figure it out? And I might say, and that's what we'd like to cover.
Yeah.
How do we really figure out what's going on in our house? And I don't know if you agree with me, but it's actually in some ways not the most promising. Some of these tools aren't the most promising tools.
No, they're not great. They're not great at all.
They're not great, but they're the best we got.
It's the best we got out there. I actually had a hygienist tell me once, Mike, you need to understand who came up with this. Well, let me back up. The most common type of a test is an air quality test, where the person doing the inspection has a little pump. That pump will suck in 75 liters of air through this little cassette, and this little cassette has a little sticky pad right in the middle of it. So the air goes in the sticky pad, or in the cassette, around that sticky pad, and then into the pump. So whatever that sticky pad collects, those particulates, we send that cassette into the lab. The lab doesn't try to grow anything. They just, based on size, shape, and color, they say that looks like you've got, for example, 30 stachy or 15 Chatomium or 200 aspergillus. They give you an idea. Again, they're not growing anything. They don't know if they're dead or alive. It's a tool, but it's not a great tool. And we have other lists of things that we'll go through one at a time, but that's just an example of, we tell everybody that goes through our training program, please realize this is just a tool. It's entirely possible to get false negatives. And, I'll give you a perfect example. I've been in numerous homes where I could see the mold literally growing on the walls in the bathroom, and the test comes back clean.
The air test?
Yeah.
Air quality test.
Yeah. And the reason for that is simply because the air or the mold is happy. It's growing. Mold only spores when it is stressed. So in the bathroom, when they're taking 20-minute showers and it's getting plenty of moisture, plenty of food, it's just going to grow. It's not going to spore out, and so that will give you a false negative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so air quality tests. That's one way to that's one tool.
Yeah, that's probably the most common.
Most common tool in the mold remediation industry. Yeah, so air quality tests, I guess, can you rate it on let's do A, B, C, D, E, like okay. School.
Yeah.
You give it a B or a C?
I give it a good solid C+.
C+?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I will say here, I don't think, and I don't think you can take one of these tools and say one of these tools alone is going to tell me.
No.
Right?
No.
So if you
I don't mean to interrupt you, but honestly, when we go in and do an inspection, the homeowner's gut feeling is, and I know that sounds like that's the most unscientific thing in the world, but oftentimes their gut tells you a lot more than what a test tells you. Either that or their healthcare practitioner is telling them, look, you're getting some kind of mold toxin from your home. Sometimes that's the best test out there, is just their gut feeling. And oftentimes we'll try to take tests to validate what they're feeling. But again, that's that air quality test. We actually did an experiment once where to give you an idea of what a small amount of air that thing pulls in, we bought some little smoke tablets and lit the smoke tablet and started emitting smoke right by the air quality cassette. We turned the pump on, and it was like, we all looked at it like really close, like it's not even pulling the smoke in.
It was right next to it.
Yeah. So it's a snapshot in time in that small space of whatever room you decide. You can take them in multiple rooms and get a more complete report, but it's a good solid C+. That's what it is.
So most likely, if someone listening wanted to call a mold remediation company or a mold testing company and said, hey, can you come, tell me what my air quality is like, or what my mold situation's like, they're most likely going to do an air quality test.
Yes. Yeah.
Probably
sure.
9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And you'll pay a couple, $200-300, depends on where you're at. And yeah, it's just not going to be a perfect situation to tell you what your mold load is necessarily.
Yeah, I actually, I had a hygienist, and we went to the, I can't remember what it's called, the National Indoor Hygienists Association conference in St. Paul about a year and a half ago. And I attended a class, and one of the hygienists was teaching the class. He said he took an air quality test at 9 in the morning, at 11 in the morning, at 1 in the afternoon, and at 3 in the afternoon. And he said, in the same exact spot, with the same exact setting on the pump. And he said, the lowest count I got was 300 overall spores. The highest count I got was 3,000. So it varied that much just within, 12 hours or less.
Yeah. Interesting. And at the end, I'd like to, if we have time, Mike, I'd like to talk about more of kind of the visual slash, you talked about smells. There's a lot of things that testing that you do personally as a homeowner that, again, are almost more valuable than what this test would do. And so hopefully we have time for that. Yeah. So air quality test, it's the most popular, the most common of any method that we can use in the industry. And then let's go to the next one, Viacell.
So that the one we just talked about, I mentioned that the lab doesn't know if those are dead or alive. They're just based on size, shape, and color. What kind of mold is that, and what are the counts?
So if I sprayed some mold killer on some mold, and or somehow it got into the cassette, they wouldn't know if it was dead or alive.
They would say, based on size, shape, and color, does that look like a mold spore or not?
Okay.
And they couldn't care less if it's alive or dead. I mean, they probably care, but they can't tell.
They care.
They're not growing it, is the point.
Yeah.
I'm sure they care. But anyway, the Viacell cassettes are, they look just like...
It's 3:45.
With a little additional cassette on top, which is designed to maintain the environment within that cassette. So when you do take that test, you take it exactly the same way as you do on a non-viable air quality test. But you send that cassette in, and the lab will actually see what grows off of that. Those are a little better. They're a little more expensive. They're a little better than just an air quality test, but they're still not great. Again, you have the same limitations in that if the mold in your home is satisfied as far as getting enough nutrients and enough moisture, it's not going to spore out.
Yeah. So you say grow it. How long are they growing it for?
I think it takes them about 7 or 8 days, usually.
So they'll put it in like a petri dish, and they'll try to get those to grow. And
they do their lab thing. That I don't know what they do, but
something really technical and science-y.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so a viability test, they try and get it to grow. If it grows, we can reasonably believe that it's an alive spore. So there's some distinction there, but cons, costs a little more, takes longer.
Yes. Yeah.
The standard air quality cassette that's non-viable takes what?
Well, sometimes you can get it as quick as 24 to 48 hours.
24 to 48 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
So viable doesn't discriminate between dead or alive. Viable discriminates.
Yeah, non-viable, they don't care. Yes.
Okay.
So anyway, bottom line is both of those are similar in that you're testing the sporing mold that's in the air.
Yeah.
You're not testing. Well, we should back up a little bit because I like to mention this when I'm teaching people about this, that mold is either growing, sporing, or dormant, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in one of those three states just about all the time.
Yeah.
And when you're doing an air quality test, whether it's a viable or a non-viable test, you're only testing for the sporing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only testing for the sporing in that room.
Yeah.
And you're only testing for the sporing in that room, in that area of that room.
Yeah.
And you're only testing for...
Yeah, it keeps going.
It goes.
Well, and I don't want to belabor this point, but it was 2 months ago, we were taking an air quality test in front of a patch of mold. And this realtor, we were working with a realtor, and they really needed an air quality documentation saying there's mold. It wouldn't suffice that we took a picture that we said there's mold there. They needed an air quality test saying it was affecting the air quality. So we took an air test in front of the patch of mold, nothing. Second one, nothing. The third one, it worked. And maybe you can comment on this. What we ended up doing is aggravating the mold.
Yeah.
You said, earlier, it's either sporing, dormant, or growing, and you said the only way to get to spore is to aggravate it, right?
Yeah.
So we actually, in order to get a more accurate appraisal of what the mold is like when it's sporing, we actually aggravated it. And can you comment to that?
Yeah, that's it's actually something that's become more and more commonplace in the industry just in the last 4 or 5 years. And for years, I kind of struggled with it. Like, are we cheating this test? By aggravating the mold? Are we being dishonest? And I finally have come almost full circle on this thing to kind of think about it this way, that we want to give the homeowner an accurate report of what's going on, right? So if we have to aggravate that mold a little bit to show them that, yes, you certainly do have mold in the home, I'd rather do that than know they have mold in the home, not aggravate it, and tell them their home is safe. Yeah. That's the worst of the two evils.
Yeah. You take a test, it's not sporing, you say you're good, and then the day later, or 2 days or 3 days, it starts sporing.
Yeah, and they get sick and they can't figure it out, and they bounce from doctor to doctor and go through that whole routine. And they go to the doctor and they say, well, we had a company test and they said we're good.
Yeah.
Well, that's dangerous.
And in some ways, when your health is on the line, you almost want to give them a worst case scenario, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is this house like when it's at its worst? Because that's when your health is going to be impacted the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I think we covered air quality tests pretty well there. Let's move on to
we need to give the Viacel a grade.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to give Viacel a grade?
No, I don't.
Will you?
Yeah, yes, I will. I'd give
C plus for the other one. What
C
about?
plus, I'd give it a good solid B minus.
So it's a notch up from the non-viable C plus.
Yeah.
Viable
B
/ Viacel.
Yeah.
B minus.
Still maybe a C plus because it still has the inherent problem with not sporing.
Yeah.
So
it's almost a B minus though, wouldn't you say? 89%.
Yeah.
If
you like the kid in the class, you give him a B minus. If you didn't like him so much, C plus.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Tape test. A very common test as well. Not so much ascertaining the air quality, but more of a surface test. Can you describe that and talk about it?
Yeah, this is handy when you just have a patch of something in your home, whether it's in your bathroom or windowsills or whatever, and you don't know what it is. And it's interesting because every class I've ever taken and every instructor that I've ever listened to on this subject, when they say, "Can you identify mold by looking at it?" they're all like, "No, you cannot identify mold by looking at it. That's a dangerous thing to do, and you probably shouldn't do it." Oftentimes we can look at it and say, "Yes, of course that's mold," but you shouldn't tell the customer, "Yes, that's mold," until you test it. The tape test is perfect for that because it's actually a little like a little slide from your 8th grade science class, and it has a little sticky square adhesive on it. You just press it right down in the mold, pull it back off, insert it into a little plastic sleeve, send it to the lab. Again, the lab, they don't grow it. Based on size, shape, and color, they'll tell you what kind of mold it is. They try to quantify it a little bit. They'll give it, I think it's a 1 through a 4. 4 being, wow, there was a lot of mold on that little patch, and 1 being there wasn't that much, but this is what it is.
Yeah.
The quantification part of it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But it will tell you that, yes, that is indeed mold. What you thought might be mold, that's mold. And that's why it's a good test.
Yeah. It's a good test. So do you recommend this when you're trying to ascertain the mold load on a home? Is this a tool people can use, really?
No. No, not really for the mold load. I mean, that's a tough one.
But
again,
if you see some mold.
Yeah, if you see some mold and you don't know if it's mold or not, and you want to know, you're like, I got a lot of this stuff in my windowsills, and I'd like to know if that's mold or not. Obviously 9 times out of 10, it's probably mold in your windowsills if it's growing in there. But it's a good test for that. Other than that, it's pretty much worthless.
Yeah.
Another good place to use it would be like in the attic.
Yeah.
Up in the attic, you can see a lot of times we see mold growth on the north side of the ceiling of the roof.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can trick you because it could be the printing on the plywood from the lumber mill.
Yes.
And I've seen it where sometimes that printing, these little black spots.
Yes.
And that's ink. That's not mold.
Yeah.
So that'd be perfect for that application.
Yes. Could you also, in that scenario, take an air quality test and see if? But again, you run into the issue of it may not be sporing.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. So tape tests. It's a tool.
It's a tool.
It's not a perfect tool. Again, can you give a grade on the tape test?
I'd give that a C minus.
C minus.
Yeah.
Oh, so even lower than, because it has very limited.
Very limited. Yeah.
Limited usage.
I mean, I guess in the application that we explained, it's an A.
Yeah.
But usefulness.
Usefulness. Yeah. And thinking about you shouldn't say I know that's mold.
Right.
Can I throw in a caveat where if you've had a leak in a flood, right there, and then suspiciously within a couple weeks you start to see some green and black.
Yeah, I don't think that's a stretch. Yeah, that there is mold. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to use some common sense there, and like you said, window seals. If you see condensation in your window seals, and then you start seeing some green, black, different colored things,
or even the I mean, this is a little bit dangerous to say, but sometimes you can look real close and see the kind of the fuzziness of mold. That's the mycelium growing on the mold, or part of the mold. That's pretty easy to say. Yeah, that's mold. But if you question it, you can do a tape test.
It's a good way to, if you're in doubt.
Yeah.
This house I did recently had mushrooms growing out of their baseboards.
Yeah, you don't need to take.
I don't think I needed to send that in.
No.
So, there's a couple exceptions to that rule. It sounds like. Okay, so that's the third tool.
Okay.
We'd like to talk about the Ermey test. ERMI. Ermey. There's also a Hertzme test. I feel like they're increasing in popularity in recent years. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely they are.
Aren't they just
especially in the kind of the homeopathic world?
Yeah.
There's been a few doctors that are kind of behind the Ermey or the Hertzme test. What the Ermey stands for is Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. So the intent was originally they were going to survey, I think, a couple thousand homes across the nation and get a baseline of what a normal home is. They realized that that's almost impossible to do. If they did come up with this test, it's kind of cool. What they do is they'll take an attachment that you get at the lab, put it on the end of like a vacuum hose. I think they vacuum up about, I want to say 20 square feet of carpet. Now the carpet is not as popular as it used to be. They'll use like a Swiffer duster and pick
Wood
up that.
floors,
Pick up the dust.
Yeah.
So I actually thought, when I heard about that, I thought, that's cool. That makes a lot of sense because we've all heard carpet is the biggest filter in the home, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to have mold and you're going to have spores, it's very likely a lot of them are in your carpet.
Yeah.
But where it gets complicated is they take that dust and they run it through what's called a PCR tests, polymerase chain reaction tests. And they actually break down the mold to the DNA. And so that drives the price up like crazy. It's a great test to tell you, like, the history of the home. Like, this home has had a mold issue for 5, 10, 15 years, and you're going to capture that in that dust, right?
You'll capture spores that have been there forever,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah. And they'll run it through the PCR test. They'll break it down and get the actual DNA. So it's good for the history of the home, and it's also good for getting exactly what mold it is. Like, there's a number of different types of aspergillus. You know, they can tell you exactly what type it is. Sometimes doctors want to know that. So it's a good test. It's expensive, but it's a good test.
And it does, in a sense, give you a mold load in a different way. What the load that's accumulated on that surface, at least, that they sampled over the years.
Yeah, I think the idea, or why it's more effective than say an air quality test, is because when mold spores out, eventually it's going to float for days sometimes, but it's eventually going to fall out. So you're gonna have a much better chance of capturing the history of that mold from over the years of the history of the home by vacuuming up the dust in the home and then sorting that out with the polymerase chain reaction test.
Yeah. And I was at a customer's house recently, maybe 3 weeks ago, where the company that did the Ermey, they wanted to swab and wipe places that they knew weren't touched, like the top of refrigerators, top of different cabinets and washers and dryers that weren't touched up there, because they wanted an area that wasn't being walked through all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that makes it any more of a reliable sample, but there's different ways they do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great test for the history of the home. But again, it's expensive.
Yeah, the cons are it's expensive.
Yeah.
And does it discriminate between a dead or a live spore?
No, not really, because you will always have DNA, even on a dead cell or a dead spore. You still have DNA remaining. So there's some limitations on that. But yeah, it's a good
test.
Yeah.
You said it's a good test 3 times, and so I'm aching to know what grade you're going to give the Ermey test.
The only reason I would drop this down to a B is the price. And if they could have taken that dust sample and the lab processed that much like they do an air quality cassette and not driven the price up, that would have been really cool.
Yeah.
But I think that has its own. I'm sure the lab has their own reasons why they can't do that.
Yeah.
But so you actually get the DNA of the mold. So it's a good solid B.
Good solid B.
Yeah.
Usefulness is maybe a little higher, but because of cost.
Yeah. Also, I will mention that the moldiness index, they want to give you a score, right? And if I remember right, the scoring is anything 10 or below is considered a healthy home.
Yeah.
10 or above is considered you need to get that fixed.
And I will say the Ermey reports that I've looked at, they cover quite a few molds. I want to say around 30 or so molds. They'll even distinguish between all the different kinds of aspergillus.
It's 4 o'clock.
And so it's useful in the sense that you can really see. Some people really want, especially people who know, like, I have a sensitivity to this kind of mold. They somehow got some testing and know I'm allergic to this specific type. It'll break down. Similar to an air quality test will do that. The ones that are most common in the industry maybe cover the top 10 most common molds.
Right.
You can get them to cover more than that, but these Ermeys cover even more, up to 30.
And I think one of the reasons why the people behind the Ermey test wanted to break it down to the DNA, because there are actually, say you're in the category of aspergillus, there are some aspergillus that are considered non-toxic and some that are considered toxic. So they can actually break it down to, okay, you've got aspergillus, which we would normally think is not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But you got the bad aspergillus.
Yeah.
So
it's good to know some of those little distinctions there. Okay, Ermey test. Got a solid B from Mike Adams' rating system. You need to come up with your own, rating.
Yeah, it's the.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
People.
Yeah, I'll workshop that.
Yeah, maybe next time we'll start a new business.
Okay.
Our final one for today, unless we have some others that I'm missing. Oh, actually, we could talk about swab tests and some other things. But let's do Air Answers first.
Okay, Air Answers is a company that approached us a few months ago. We mentioned on the air quality tests, the cassettes, we pull in 75 liters of air.
Yeah.
You set the pump at 15 liters per minute, and you run it for 5 minutes. That's how you get your 75 liters per air. The Air Answers company has this small machine that they've come up with that pulls in, instead of 75 liters of air, pulls in 1 million liters of air.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It's a big difference, but it also takes a long time to do it, obviously.
How long are we talking here?
It depends on what you're looking for. I think if you're just looking for a mold test, I think it's 24 hours.
Yeah.
If you want a complete rundown of everything that's going on in your home, VOCs and all kinds of stuff like that, you can run
allergens, things like that, right?
Run it for
pollen,
multiple days. Yeah,
stuff like that.
So, we don't have a ton of experience with it.
Yeah,
but I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah, I think it's a good tool, and I think they're still in development. I think MIT and Harvard people were involved in the creation of it, and so that's promising. My experience has been the report will get similar to the Ermey. It'll give you an index.
Okay.
It'll tell you what percentage of homes, are worse and better than your home, where you fit as far as homes they've tested. It doesn't do a great job at distinguishing mold types. It just tells you where are you at.
They kind of dumb it down for you.
Yeah, and they'll give you a rating: low, medium, high.
Right.
Your mold load essentially is low, medium, or it's high compared to all the tests they've done. Again, it's a tool.
But getting back to that example I used of that hygienist teaching us that he took the test 4 or 5 different times during the day, and had a difference of 300 to 3,000.
Yeah.
If you run this thing for 24 hours, that should kind of balance that out.
Yeah.
So you get an average of what's going on, and it's going to be more accurate.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued, and I think I think they're still adding stuff and developing, and I'm intrigued to see where that goes because we've used it a few times and it has a lot of promise. 1 million liters per air compared to 75.
That's more.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
I haven't run the numbers, but I know it's more.
No, I have not either. Okay. Now do you want to touch on a couple others?
Yeah. So we can
briefly?
touch on the one thing that we occasionally dabble in. No pun intended, but swab testing.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Swab testing is, I'll tell you where we use it mostly is for I'll give you an example, wrestling mats in a high school. They've had an outbreak of whatever that stuff wrestlers get.
Yeah, cauliflower ear.
That's it, yeah. And so we can do swab tests, send that into the lab. They'll actually, I honestly don't know if they grow it or they do some kind of a PCR test on it. I don't know. I should know, but I don't know.
No.
But swab tests are more geared towards bacteria than they are towards mold.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same type of deal. It's like a tape test, but they're going to grow it. And so it's a good little tool.
It's like the viable version of an air quality test.
Yeah,
but
it kind of is.
For a tape test, it's the viable version of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. Do you want to talk about the Anderson sampler?
Yeah, the Anderson sampler, and there's been some newer versions of that. In fact, I have a good friend of mine in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, that has been toying around with this, what they call an Anderson sampler, but the one he has is a different brand, and he said it's not quite as cumbersome. But an Anderson sampler is for the person doing the test, it's a little bit cumbersome, so mold inspectors don't really like to use them all that much. They're kind of a bunch of stainless steel plates, and it's almost like a filtering system as they pull the air through it, and then they send that last one into the lab, and the lab will grow that. The one that my good friend Troy was telling me about, he said it's much easier, but that is traditionally before biocells were invented, Anderson samplers were the industry standard. But like I say, they're a little bit cumbersome. They're whoever's doing the testing has to make sure they clean them really well between tests, because obviously you can cross-contaminate from another home. So they're getting better, I guess is the way to put it.
Okay. Well, I failed to get grades on the last 3, so we're gonna have to go back. Air answers.
Our answers. I'm going to say, what do you get when you're in a class and you didn't finish?
Oh, an I? Incomplete?
Incomplete.
Or
Incomplete.
Incomplete?
Yeah, I'm going to give them
the verdict is out?
Yeah, we like it. We think we like it, but we need more experience with it. Yeah.
Okay. Swab test? Same as the tape?
Swab test is a good, it's a good C+. Yeah.
C+?
Yeah.
So better than the tape test, which was a C minus.
Yeah, I think so.
A little
Because
bit better.
you're going to grow it.
You're going to grow it and make sure it's still active and alive. And then the Anderson sampler?
Anderson sampler, again, it's cumbersome. There are some new innovations, like I mentioned. My buddy in Pennsylvania really likes what he's seeing. So I'm going to give that a good solid B.
B?
Yeah.
Okay. So your highest grade, coming back to our beginning statement, your highest grade here is a B.
And it's the one that I don't use.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe we've done some self-discovery here today.
Yeah. The Ermey and the Anderson sampler are your Bs.
Right. Well, Ermey we don't use just strictly because of the expense.
Yeah.
We can almost treat a home as cheap as we can do an Ermey test. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that kind of concludes our these are the major. I'm sure there's some little things that are out there that people do, but these are the major ones that you're going to find. If you ever call a mold company, they're going to do at least 1 or 2 of these, and undoubtedly they'll do air quality tests, and they'll have tape tests or swab tests. That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Ermey, you're going to have to search maybe a little harder. Air answers is kind of a brand new thing. The Anderson sampler, I'm sure you can find that too, but less common. So I think we'll kind of wrap up here, Mike, because I think this gives people a little taste for what they can do, or what's even out there as far as testing, and they can kind of see. I liked your rating. I liked your grading system because it tells people, it really paints the picture that I wanted to paint, which was, wow, the best I can get is a B.
Yeah. Right.
And so what I'd like to do next time is I'd like to talk more about how we can supplement these tools with some of the stuff you were talking about, things that the homeowner can do,
right?
Other indicators that there's a mold problem going on besides just the air quality test.
Right. Yeah. But I mentioned this at the first of this segment, but honestly, it's the homeowner that usually has a gut feeling something's wrong. They come back from vacation, leaving the house closed up for a week, and there's just a weird smell. It's almost always mold. I mean, the homeowners, their gut feeling usually is more accurate than any of these tests.
Would you say that if it smells moldy, mildewy, is there any scenario where that would not be a mold problem?
Not that I've ever seen in 15 years. If you can smell mold, you've got mold.
Okay.
Going on. Yeah.
So if you can smell mold, do I need to take one of these tests?
In my opinion, no. But it's your call as a customer.
Okay.
If you feel like you want some kind of validation, or honestly, we oftentimes run into a situation where the wife knows I know I have mold in this home, and the husband's like, I don't smell anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes they need validation,
Yeah.
but it's the gut of the homeowner, or oftentimes it's the healthcare practitioner that they are incredibly accurate with the testing they have, that they know you've got mold in the home.
Yeah. If your body is if they test you, the health practitioner, if they test your body and it's chock full of toxins and mold.
Yeah, it's either your home or your workplace.
Yeah, and you spend, 90% of your time at home.
Right.
It's a good chance your home has an issue,
yeah,
whether you smell it or not. And because one thing I've learned is mold, we always associate mold with that mildew, moldy, musty, but not every mold smells.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
And so sometimes people say, I don't see mold, I don't smell mold, but my doctor says I'm full of mold and I'm feeling sick.
Yeah.
There could still be a mold load issue there.
Yeah.
Going on.
And other things that throw it is when your HVAC system kicks on, your heater or your air conditioner, that may either introduce moldy air to the home, or it may actually make the home smell a little better because you're moving things around.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a moving target often to try to figure out what's going on with it. But there are a lot of variables that kind of throw you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to touch on a lot of these things in the forthcoming podcast, but thanks for joining us, and I hope you learned something. I actually learned something, and I knew where we were going. I had the agenda right in front of me, so I appreciate that.
I didn't learn a thing.
I know. You're not supposed to. You're the expert.
No.
You're the mold.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word for you. Mold.
I don't know.
Savant.
Yeah.
Wizard.
I like that. Wizard. I like wizard. Yeah.
Mold guru.
Don't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
I don't, certainly.
Something to brag about.
Right.
You know a lot about mold.
I don't want to be your mold guy. I want to be your fun guy.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. Till next time.
Thanks for listening to the Mold Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth information on mold illness and recovery.